Hi students, welcome back to the Google Classroom of Plus 2 Indian Economic Development, Chapter 2 Indian Economy 1950 to 1990. How are you children? I hope all of you are fine and safe there at home.
Children, in the last class, you have learnt about industry. Today, we would focus more on small scale industry and trade policy of our country. Small scale industry. In 1955, the Village and the Small Scale Industries Committee, also called the CARB Committee, noted the possibility of using small scale industries for promoting rural development. A small scale industry is defined with reference to the maximum investment allowed on the assets of a unit. This limit has changed over a period of time. In 1950, a small scale unit was one which invested a maximum of rupees 5 lakhs, but at present the maximum investment allowed is rupees 1 crore. It is believed that the small scale industries are more labor intensive, that means they use more labor than the large scale industries and therefore generate more employment. Okay, children, in the previous classes, we have already studied about two types of industries, labor intensive and capital intensive industries. What do you mean by labor intensive? In labor intensive industries, they use more labor than the capital. Then the capital intensive industries, they use more capital than the labor. So all these small scale industries are in the category of labor intensive industries. But these industries cannot compete with the big industrial firms. It is obvious that the development of small scale industry requires them to be shielded from the large firms. For this purpose, the production of a number of products was reserved for the small scale industry. The criterion of reservation being the ability of these units to manufacture the goods. They were also given concessions such as lower excise duty and bank loans at a lower interest rates. Then next topic, trade policy import substitution. Trade policy import substitution. The industrial policy that we adopted was closely related to the trade policy. In the first 7 plans, trade was characterized by what is commonly called an inward-looking trade strategy. Technically, this strategy is called import substitution. This policy aimed at replacing or substituting imports with domestic production. So this gives more importance to the domestic production or domestic producers. Okay. Then in this policy, the government promoted the domestic industries from the foreign competition. The protection from imports took two forms, tariffs and quotas. So the government in the starting stage, they could not compete with the products from the international markets. So the government tried to protect the domestic industries in the form of this import substitution. There are two forms which are the tariffs and quotas. What do you mean by tariffs? Tariffs are a tax on imported goods. They make imported goods more expensive and discourage their use. Okay, tariffs are a tax on imported goods and they make imported goods more expensive. Because of the imposition of these tariffs, what happened? The price of a particular product becomes more compared to the domestic market. So it discourages their use. Then quotas specify the quantity of goods which can be imported. The effect of tariffs and quotas is that they restrict imports and therefore protect the domestic firms from the foreign competition. Because these domestic industries were in the stage of startup stage, so the government tried to protect these startup industries by imposing tariffs and quotas. Then The policy of protection is based on the notion that the industries of developing countries are not in a position to compete against the goods produced by more developed economies. Then it is assumed that if the domestic industries are protected, they will learn to compete in the course of time. The effect of policies on industrial development. The achievements of India's industrial sector during the first 7 plans are impressive indeed. First one, the proportion of GDP contributed to the industrial sector increased from the period 11.8% in 1950 to 51 to 24.6% in 1990 to 91. Then the rise of industry's share of GDP is an important indicator of development. The 6% annual growth rate of industrial sector during this period is commendable. No longer was Indian industry restricted largely to cotton, textiles and jute. In fact, the industrial becomes well diversified by 1990, largely due to the public sector. Then the promotion of small scale industries gave opportunities to those people who did not have the capital to start large firms to get into business. Then the protection from the foreign competition enabled the government of development of indigenous industries in the areas of electronics and automobile sectors which otherwise could not have developed. In spite of this contribution made by the public sector to the growth of Indian economy, some economists are critical of the performance of many public sector enterprises. The point is that after 4 decades of planned development of Indian economy, no distinction was made between what the public sector alone can do and what the private sector can also do. So many public sector firms incurred huge losses but continued to function because it is difficult to close a government undertaking even if it is a drain on the nation's limited resources. Then this does not mean that the private firms are always profitable. But however, a loss-making private firm will not waste resources by being kept running despite the losses. The need to obtain a license to start an industry was misused by industrial houses. A big industrialist would get a license not for starting a new firm but to prevent competitors from starting new firms. Then the excessive regulation of what come to be called the permit license Raj prevented certain firms from becoming more efficient. More time was spent by the industrialist in trying to obtain a license or lobby with the concerned ministries rather than on thinking about how to improve their products. One example is there in our Malayalam film Midhunam. Mohanlal is trying to get permit license from the authorities and he failed to do so. Then the protection from foreign competition is also being criticized on the ground that it continued even after it proved to do more harm than good. Then due to restrictions on imports, the Indian consumers had to purchase whatever the Indian producers produced. The producers were aware that they had a captive market, so they had no incentive to improve the quality of their goods. Then a few economists also point out that the public sector is not meant for earning profits but to promote the welfare of the nation. The public sector firms on this view should be evaluated on the basis of the extent to which they contribute to the welfare of the people and not on the profits they earn. Then, regarding the protection, some economists hold that we should protect our producers from foreign competition as long as the rich nations continue to do so. Owing to all these conflicts, economics called for a change in our policy.
Let us conclude today's session by recollecting all the concepts.
The progress of the Indian economy during the first 7 plans was impressive indeed. Our industries became far more diversified compared to the situation at independence. India became self-sufficient in food production thanks to the Green Revolution. Land reforms resulted in abolition of the hated zamindari system. However, many economists became dissatisfied with the performance of many public sector enterprises. Then excessive government regulation prevented growth of entrepreneurship. In the name of self-reliance, our producers were protected against foreign competition, and this did not give them the incentive to improve the quality of goods that they produced. Our policies were inward oriented, and so we failed to develop a strong export sector. The need for reform of economic policy was widely felt in the context of changing global economic scenario, and the new economic policy was initiated in 1991 to make our economy more efficient.
So children, please note that the corresponding URL, notes of the lesson and test paper are also attached along with this video. Make use of all these available resources, study well and attempt the test paper without fail. Thank you.